The views expressed and opinions given by the individual hosts and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Z-Talk Radio, its affiliates, or sponsors.
Hello and welcome to Canadian X Talk Radio. It's Saturday night, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. I'm your host, Glen Ferguson. Joining me as co-host tonight will be Derrick Whiteskycloud once he arrives. But in the meantime, my wife Janessa, as per normal, will be co-hosting. How are you doing, hon?
I'm doing well. Oh, that's just the dog coming down the stairs. I thought it was the Derrick.
Not quite.
Yeah.
Our special guest tonight on the show is Marty Rosenblatt, Associative Remote Viewer. How are you doing tonight, Marty?
Doing very well, thanks.
So tell me about remote viewing for those who, my listeners who have no idea what remote viewing is all about.
Well, remote viewing is a term that goes back to like the 1970s with people who were working for various government agencies and they just couldn't use the word psychic phenomenon. But it is a type of clairvoyance. However, it's done always under strict protocols, and but it is the ability to describe almost anything, but say locations, what people are doing at a distance, and distance includes not only space but time. So remote viewers have the ability basically to move around in the universe rather freely when it works. It's not perfect, but the military used it for 20 years. It started with spying on the Soviets, and they were spying on us, and most other countries were in fact involved during the Cold War.
Yeah, I actually read a lot of stuff. I was ex-military as well, and I know that remote viewing was used as a possibility to obtain information from other forces.
Exactly. So they would be used in places where other intelligence methods did not work. And they were almost always used in coordination with these other techniques.
Yeah, my military career, I didn't get as much into it as maybe Glen did. But I'm just kind of thinking of that movie with George Clooney. That kind of...
Oh, I mean, that's Derrick Goats.
Yeah,
well,
men that stare at goats.
That's
yeah.
slightly different.
Well, I know that, but, you kind of... That's one of the things that say laymen... I mean, I had a military career of 8 years, but I was never involved into that other side. I was a support troop, so...
I mean, that was an interesting movie, and it had... some real actually accurate information in it, but it also, in my opinion, went a little bit too far on the humorous for Hollywood viewing side. So I wasn't that happy with it, but it touched on many of the things that in fact were going on. Once you start investigating the capabilities of consciousness, you get into all kinds of areas which are really different than remote viewing, but applications of consciousness.
So how did you get involved with remote viewing in the beginning?
Well, I was really always interested in science fiction kinds of stuff, and had always been a reader of psychic phenomena. You hear all of these very interesting stories. But it wasn't until I came across an article by Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ back in the late 70s, where they did a true scientific experiment at Stanford Research Institute. And at that time, I had contacts with the Defense Intelligence Agency, and I went to them and said, God, you guys really need to know about this. This is something you clearly could use. And they sent me off to SRI, Stanford Research Institute, to meet these guys. It was only later I found out that they were funding them. So they obviously knew about all this before. But these were very impressive scientists who had done very impressive work, demonstrating rather thoroughly, I thought, with like odds against chance. Everything in this business, when you're doing stuff like this, since it's not perfect, you compare it to what you would expect to get statistically by chance. And I don't remember the exact stats now, but it was probably something like 1,000,000 to 1 that their results would be obtained by chance. And they were able to demonstrate, I thought, very convincingly, that you could gather information in real time. They would send people out to random locations, double blind, and remote viewers would get very good descriptions that were independently judged. And then they also did what was the most fascinating to me, and what is really my field of study, remote viewing of the future, and that's precognition.
Yeah.
So locations that weren't even chosen until after the remote viewer did his work. So his instructions were describe the location of what's called an outbounder, a person who went out to a random location, say 2 hours from now.
Yeah.
And he would finish his transcript. And that worked remarkably well. So it turned out that was the part of the paper that got most of the criticism from the scientific community.
That's not surprising.
Well, that's exactly right. And that's still true today. The scientific community refuses to accept the reality of remote viewing, precognition, a lot of related paranormal realities.
There goes the dog.
Excuse the dog, but it sounds like Derrick just appeared.
Walked in. Here, I'll let you continue on. Derrick just walked in. Well, let Derrick sit in my seat there.
Derrick has just joined us. Derrick Whiteskycloud from Between Two Worlds Radio. How you doing, Derrick?
I'm good.
Apparently, Marty knows you.
Hi, Derrick. Yeah, I know you through your email address and work with Scott.
Oh, yeah. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well.
Good.
How about yourself?
I'm good. Okay. So I knowingly you are also a remote viewer, and I do the same as what you do.
Well, that's right. I do the remote viewing. I do the general manager stuff but as you know, my focus is on ARV and precognition.
Yeah. Well, that's actually very good because it's something that I've been doing since I would say last 20 years. I just through my own personal research, that's how I was able to do it. So, but when I heard about you, and I went, oh man, I got to listen to this guy.
Okay. Well,
So, how did you get involved in this, Derrick?
How I got involved in it? I was just a kid. I was like 14, 15 years old. I've had seen visions for, I would say, I don't know how it happened. For some reason, I remember seeing a movie a long time ago, years and years ago when I was a kid, and they talked about remote viewing, but it was like more of a science fiction thing of it, And then I thought, I wonder if it could be done. So I would sit in my bedroom and I would see myself or think of seeing myself outside of the room, but I'm not leaving it physically, and see myself and see if I can remote view in somebody else's place. And then I remember talking to Kenny Kingston years later, who's actually a well-known psychic medium. He used to be, actually he was called the Psychic to the Stars. He used to read from famous movie stars, and he used to remote view, and I learned some of it from him. So it was kind of cool, because when you come back, say you want to be with someone's place, and normally you can't make it there if you have something else you got to do. But in the morning when you wake up, or I feel my feet felt sore, and I realized after that even sometimes my body was even coming up, and my spirit's coming in my body being there. But you're also remote viewing the physical. So that's hard to explain. It's an etheric part of you is leaving your body, but you can see everything around you. You're watching people doing things, and I've actually had people actually tell me that they've actually seen me there, but I physically wasn't there. But they said they've seen me there, as if my spirit or my physicality somehow showed them from a distance, and they said, "Oh well, we saw you." And I said, "I don't know how you can see me when I was actually at home sleeping." "Oh no, we saw you." So try and figure that one out.
Yeah, well, that's out of body experiences.
Yeah,
and that's another paranormal effect. I wouldn't say that's exactly remote viewing, but all of these things are related, in my opinion. And I come from a position that says consciousness itself is the most fundamental aspect of our universe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, Derrick is, I don't know what you want to say, manipulating when he goes out of body. And that's basically what is the mind moves within when it does remote viewing.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was looking at the idea that it was some sort of out-of-body experience, but after reading up on remote viewing, I was quite surprised.
It is different. It is different. Remote viewing, somehow the mind is just in touch with another place and time.
Do you remember that movie that came out a few years back? And it was based on these guys were recruiting people to do remote viewing in the military.
Wasn't that the Men of Staring Goats? We were just discussing that as you flew with you, actually.
And Men of Staring at Goats, I thought was quite fascinating. Thinking that, is that very similar to that as well?
Yeah.
Not goats, but...
I don't remember how much remote viewing they did in there. They did some, and I think those parts were reasonably accurate. But then, the movie did all kinds of other things that...
Because they were basically, their statement was it was based on true facts, or it was based on the book itself was through its research.
Yeah, it was based on some facts, but like they showed a guy walk through a wall. That never happened, as far as I know. That was the dramatic stuff. And people who don't know anything about it can't really distinguish between those. So there was Hollywood in there, plus some real stuff. The community pretty much knows who most of the people are, and they talked about it after the movie. And so we could, some characters are mixes of people that have been around for a long time. As I said earlier, I go back to when Hal Puthoff and Russ Targ were first starting to do their work, and I know a lot of military guys. I've given workshops with them. So this stuff is kind of real, and that movie just extended a little bit too far. But the reality of it is enough. The examples of the successes in remote viewing are rather astonishing. Joe McMoneagle, for example, was able to describe in detail the first Soviet, it's called the Boomer, when they launched their first Soviet submarine. The CIA knew there was something strange going on in this area in the Soviet Union, but there's all kinds of military activity, and there were lots of equipment being brought in, but they didn't know what. So they went to remote viewers. And Joe McMoneagle said there was a huge submarine. There was a normal-sized one there, but next to it was this huge submarine that they were building. And they basically laughed at him. He actually apparently got quite upset at that. But he said they were going to launch it on such and such a date. And they said, that's ridiculous. It's not that near water and all that. Well, it turns out within 5 days of when he said they were going to launch it, they built a canal from whatever the body of water is there, and I'm sorry I don't remember the details. And they launched the boomer.
Wow.
And the sketches he drew of that submarine were quite accurate. And there's story after story like that where they were right on.
When did this all start? Like, when did remote viewing really start? Like, to be, I would say, who decided to make this happen? Was it through military-wise, or was it actually some people themselves that had, say, well, I can do this, and I don't know why I can do this, and did someone approach that particular organization and say, well, here, let's test you?
My understanding is that Pudov and Targ were basically approached by the CIA to start looking into this area while they were at SRI. And they got initially some low levels of funding to do that. There was a fellow who died just a little over a year ago named Ingo Swan that they brought aboard. And they also found a ex-police chief, Pat Price. And these guys started doing remarkable things, including getting into some top secret files, which caused all kinds of security people to go to SRI and for a while accuse these people of somehow spying, because there was no way they could get that information.
That's right.
And then that led to a increase in their funding, and basically started the program in a bigger way.
I did a little reading on the subject, and I know that remote viewing was used extensively during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Okay, yeah, I don't know too much about that. What do you know about that?
It was a book by, what's his name? It'll come to me. It's called Psychic Warrior, was the name of the book.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Morehouse was the name of the author, I believe.
Yeah. Right. But, okay, so he talked about that in there. It was also used with the Iranian hostages.
Yeah.
Extensively. And it was used by almost every agency, apparently, in the U.S. government. So the U.S. tax dollars were very much involved in this. It was used by drug agents to try to pinpoint which ships might have drugs on them. I would be surprised if the Canadian government didn't have something to do with this.
Oh, I'm pretty sure they do.
Yeah.
So how is the community today?
Maybe that's the reason why they came to pay me a visit my home.
When was that?
About over a year ago. The military showed up in my home.
Interesting.
I'm serious. And it startled me at 2 o'clock in the morning. But here's how they showed up. They didn't show up physically. I was actually asleep, and I heard this wake up, and I opened my eyes, and here was a gun in my face, a big rifle, military rifle. The guy was in full view. I woke up startled. I went, whoa. And he had a gun, and I had seen his whole face. So he was in military uniform.
And this wasn't an out of body. You're saying he really broke into your home?
He actually, I don't know how it was, but how it happened, but it startled the hell out of me. He suddenly disappeared, but when I saw him, and he says, keep your mouth shut. And that's when I was actually doing what you're doing now.
That would be more of an out of body experience.
It scared the living hell out of me.
Well, I guess I'm trying to just personally trying to understand if he was there physically, or was his consciousness somehow working to scare you?
That's what I'm thinking.
I think what his consciousness was sent to go after me, because he knew who I was. He said my name. what I understand, that when you start to get too deep into remote viewing, sometimes they notice that you become a threat. Like, even if you already know who I am, the word can get around. And so if the military feels, or somebody feels, that you become a little bit of an interference, they're going to try and shut you off.
Well, I've never had that experience.
And you've been out since the 70s.
We're working ARV. We're not doing any explorations of military-related sites or anything like that. Were you involved in probing some government secrets in some way?
I was involved in extraterrestrials.
Okay, well, who knows what that gets involved in.
Yeah.
So maybe that did motivate it. Or I'm going to give you another hypothesis, and I don't, and please don't take this wrong.
Oh, no.
But and this is a hypothesis, you may have been coming from a place where you know they're trying to keep extraterrestrial information secret and protected.
Yes.
And so you may have, in fact, I don't know how to say this properly, but caused this to happen yourself, rather than another agency watching you and sending somebody out. You understand the distinction?
Yeah, it made sense. I'm not I never judge anything saying, oh, it's right or wrong. Anything's possible now these days.
Yeah, boy, we're coming from the same place. And that's because we're in the realm of consciousness. We're in the realm of what's called non-locality, and this is a quantum mechanical term, where indeed everything is connected, but the center of it for you is your personal consciousness and everything that's going on within you. So that's why it's a hypothesis that I put out there, as opposed to they doing it. You may have done it, but the distinction is not as big as you might think, since we're all connected.
Yeah.
So the community today with remote viewing, it's apparently quite large and worldwide. What kind of numbers are we looking at as far as remote viewers?
You say it's quite large. I think it is growing. I think it's minuscule in terms of many other communities, and I really don't have a good estimate of that. I mean, there are these International Remote Viewing Association conferences, and people do come from all over the world, and they get about 200 people. So I don't know what that means. Maybe if you extrapolate up, a factor of 10 would be 2,000, a factor of 100 would be 20,000. My best guess is you're somewhere between, maybe 10,000 people who are pretty doing something with it, not just heard about it. A lot more people have heard about it, but people who are actually involved in doing it, rough estimate, several thousand.
Wow.
Have you ever worked with Major Ed Dames?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Have you ever worked with Major Ed Dames, remote viewing?
I have never worked with him. No, I work with people who have been trained by him.
Okay.
And they have their own style. Ed Dames, many people in the community have various names for him. I think he's an excellent remote viewer, but I also believe he doesn't accept that remote viewers may indeed be wrong sometimes. And he's been called Dr. Doom because many of his predictions have discussed the end of the world and things like that, and we're still here.
Because I remember the one incident that he actually talked about was remote viewing hell. And that put a bit of a startle and scare in a lot of people when they were actually radio listeners. I'm not going to go deep into that, but what I want to go into is that, can a person remote view, say, heaven? Can a person remote view or have they tried to remote view, having to say, can we go further than just the earthly
So you're talking about getting into different dimensions there.
Yeah, different dimensions. Could we actually make that? Could we actually reach that by any chance?
Let me make a few points here first. Remote viewing is not 100% accurate. That's so important to understand. And so when you say, can you, it's even hard to answer that question sometimes, because you can ask a remote viewer, okay, tell me about heaven. And you know what? They will give you, and it'll be blind. It'll be tasking that they don't know about. A tasker gave it to them, so it wasn't the tasker's mind.
Yeah.
There's mental telepathy is obviously reality when consciousness is the fundamental. We have all kinds of examples of that. So maybe the remote viewer gets the tasking somehow from the tasker, whatever, and they'll give you something. Now, is that accurate? Is that person's perception of what the word heaven means? I mean, I think our whole society has to understand to make kind of judgments on their own.
So it would be actually how we would understand it then.
He would give you a response. Now, how are you going to interpret that? Let me tell you why I like ARV, Associative Remote Viewing, because it's something where you always get feedback. If you ask the question, tell me about heaven, how are you going to know? Maybe after you die, you'll know, and you say, oh, you know what, that guy was right. But there's no way of knowing.
Yeah.
The remote viewing that is of most interest to me, and I think is most valuable, is remote viewing where you can get feedback. Now, maybe before we get into associative remote viewing, let me give you an example of something that's not quite as far away as heaven, but involves Jupiter. Ingo Swann was asked, and I've got a whole article on this on my website. Ingo Swann was asked to go and use his remote viewing skills to view Jupiter. And this was the same time, I think it was the Voyager mission was sent off. So this must have been in the 70s. And these guys said, well, hell, if the Voyager can do it, our remote viewers ought to be able to do it. So in a blind fashion, they asked him to view Jupiter. One of the things which he came up with, and this was startling to everybody, but as he was approaching this big body, this big planet, he saw rings. He saw rings around Jupiter. The guys who gave it to him said he must have gone to the wrong planet. They didn't know what was going on. But, he said lots of other things as well. And they wrote down the transcript. I think they tried to give that transcript to some reputable scientists, including Carl Sagan, to have it at the record that they did it in advance.
Yeah.
I don't think Carl Sagan took it.
Probably not.
But anyway, some people did take it. When the Voyager arrived, and I don't know if you remember this, but one of the first things they noticed were there were rings around Jupiter. And they have found that transcript was remarkably accurate. So, you see, that's an example where they did a remote viewing and they got feedback.
Yeah.
And it was remarkably accurate. That's startling.
So the associative remote viewing, what's the difference?
Associative remote viewing, you're asked to describe a target, which might be a specific place outside a random location, though nowadays it's mostly a photograph, but you're asked to describe what goes on at that site, and describe that site at the time the photograph was taken. We in fact call that a photo site, because a photograph is two-dimensional. The place there was fully three-dimensional. It might have sounds, it might have smells, and the remote viewer's consciousness can go to that site.
But notice you're asking a remote viewer to describe what he's going to see and re-experience as feedback tomorrow.
Yeah.
Now, if all you did was one, that would be remote viewing. What associative, so that's a type of remote viewing, and that is often done.
Yeah.
You get you have some interesting photograph, and you ask a remote viewer, okay, I'm going to show you this tomorrow, describe it now. And they can do a very good job on that most of the time, but not all the time. They're not right all the time.
Yeah, like I said before we started the show, I did a couple of tests over the last couple of days just to check into it, see if it was a viable subject for me. And like I said, I was given 4 letters, I believe, and totally clear my mind completely, as they would say, an empty rice bowl, and try and focus on a place. And I came up with, I could see mountains, I could see like a valley and a boat in the middle. I roll it down, and then when I went to actually take a look at the photograph in the results page, I was pretty damn close to being accurate. But I don't know how accurate that would be over multiple tests.
Well, and they've done that, and they've come up with ways of measuring the accuracy. But let me tell you what's special about associative remote viewing. Imagine now if as a tasker, this is the person who gives the task to the remote viewer, he has 2 pictures which are quite different. One might be something like you described, an outdoor scene of some sort.
Yeah.
The other might be an indoor room with some activity going on with people, an indoor basketball game, for example, okay, as opposed to an outdoor scene. And imagine if with these 2 pictures, there was a big sporting event going on, and you would put one on the back of one photo, you would put Team A wins. On the back of the other photo, you would put Team B wins. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you have 2 photos. Team A, Team B wins. Now, the tasker still gives a remote viewer. From the remote viewer's perspective, it's exactly the same. Describe for me the photo site that you're going to see tomorrow.
Yeah.
Now, the remote viewer says, oh, I see all kinds of action. I see multiple people. I hear a lot of noise, and draws maybe some circles, and clearly he's tuned in to the basketball picture. Well, that gives the tasker the ability to make a prediction before the game, because the prediction is Team A will win, because how did the remote viewer get that information? What happens is the game then is played. If Team A wins, that's the picture the person is shown. So there's the association between Team A and the game. Mm-hmm. So that's what associative remote viewing is. And notice there's no vagueness now.
Yeah.
You either get a hit or a miss. If Team B wins, then you show the outdoor scene, and that would be considered a miss.
Yeah.
But it's clean, and you can do statistics on it, and you can wager on it. And this can be used for sporting events. It can be used for financials as well, for financial instruments as well.
So basically stock market predictions, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Wow.
Russell Targ used this in the silver market way back when, many years ago.
Yeah, I was going to say something about if they remote view, can they remote view futuristic things, or is it just to be at that moment on like the time frame now?
No, remote viewing can do past, present, and future.
Okay. A lot of my work too, I get called by the police to come and help find missing people, and I remote view to find those people myself, whether they're living or not. And it's interesting because when I am sent out, like I'll, no matter where I go, when the police find out that I'm in town and that they're really having to deal with a case that could be even 20 years old and they haven't been able to solve a particular photograph of that missing person, then they'll come up to me and ask me, can I help them with it? I said, sure. For some reason, now very few police officers or police forces really don't want to depend on us. Do you feel that they feel intimidated, or can these officers actually learn from what you do to help develop cases more often?
There's a person I know that does the same thing, Pam Coronado. And there are more and more police and other kinds of official government agencies that are getting interested in this and go to private people like Pam and like Derrick. But there is still what way back when I first got into this business in the 70s is called the giggle factor. And you're doing what? You're spending our money on what? You're crazy. And so I think the biggest impediment is being willing to admit that you're working with psychics. So I don't think the majority of police forces will get involved, but there are been lots of cases where they were helpful, and that's the other thing. Usually they're just helpful. Describing a place in great detail only helps, I mean, you could say there's a river nearby, you know what I mean? All by itself, it's rarely the answer. But if a police force is willing to work with a psychic and understand that they can give them leads, I believe it can be, and I know in many cases it has been very helpful.
Like I don't look for grandeur credit on TV to help find missing people. My job, I would prefer to do, is just to be, if an officer or the police force are asking for my help, I just say, well, this is what I see. Give it a shot. You got nothing to lose. Mm-hmm. We've got a boy that's went missing. I would say more than maybe 20 years ago now. The Michael Dunahee, and I kept on telling them where he should be, and they still refused to go there. And I've had every officer you think of and call me up every time one case is in a cold case. They put that file aside, and 5 years later they call me up again. Another officer calls me up again. But for some reason, as soon as it's presented to someone in their office about this Dunahee case, they suddenly shut it off. And for some reason, certain things I don't know, maybe, I'm not sure if it's the Surrey police or but if I'm in Alberta, the police officers, their RCMP, they want me bad. They'll say, Derrick, here, what can you do for us here? And I've had people coming back and say, yeah, we found them 2 weeks after, exactly where you said they were. So
that's beautiful.
There are certain people have to be really open to it, and if they're not open to it, that's their own decision, your own judgment. There's only so much you can do.
That's right. Yeah.
Now,
exactly
another part of it too that I'm interested about is that you remember how they, like, for example, there's to go into sort of similarity of a psychic part of it, or a psychic analysis, and that is, there's a fellow by the name of the Amazing Randy. I'm sure you know who he is.
Yes,
And the Amazing Randy he loves to pick on us. And I remember years back, he kept on saying he had $1 million prize for us, that if we can actually solve all the orders of I guess we'll say everything they want to hand us to solve, and if we actually get him 100%, that he's willing to give us $1 million. Well, at very first, he never had that $1 million, but he was just trying to set people up and get people angry. But down the road, when he finally got his $1 million, then he challenged a few of the psychics on television. I remember very well who was there at the time. But I remember one of his questions was he was going to actually put things inside these envelopes, and there's going to be like 12 large envelopes with a photograph in each one. And he wanted everybody to actually name that person's name in each of these envelopes. Even though you may not know that person, but he wanted first and last names, he wanted details, like you wouldn't believe, everything in there. Mm-hmm. Is that very similar to what we are talking about now, or is this something totally different?
You mean in associative remote viewing?
Yeah.
Well, no, that's totally different. He's asking for way too specific information, and for someone to get all 12 right, not that I have $1 million, but I'd be willing to give $1 million, and nobody is up to doing that now. However, associative remote viewing is different, because notice you only have to get enough information to distinguish between, in my example, if you remember, the two photographs or two photo sites. One was a basketball, one was an outdoor site.
Yeah.
The remote viewer just has to describe and sketch what he's going to see the next day, and get enough so that a judge can say, oh, look, this definitely matches target A better than target B. And that's very different than what Randy was asking.
What about, again, another part too is that, seeing that we're talking remote viewing, is that when you sit and you're talking to us at this moment, can you remote view while you're in conversation, or do you have to take a while to, say, take 3, 4, 5 minutes to get started to make the remote view, if you know what I'm talking about?
I don't know. I would think some people who are good enough at this can basically do what we call cool down before you start a remote viewing session. You do try to get into a quiet space, so you listen, to your inner, we call it the subconscious, whatever you want to call it, but the information is coming from somewhere inside yourself. Mm-hmm. And they can do that pretty quickly, so they could probably remote view, right now. I mean, I imagine, in fact, I'm getting in images now of the two of you. I don't know if your wife is still there. I don't see her there. But
nope, she just went back upstairs. So
okay, so
this is curious.
That would be remote viewing, whether it's accurate or not. So I just did it there.
What kind of images would you get of us?
Just the two of you, sort of near each other. Well, I'm wearing a headset, but I got an image of one of you wearing a headset, and that was all.
That would be correct. That's good call. Good call.
Good call.
Really? Just one of you were wearing a headset?
That's right.
There's only one.
Okay.
And that would be me.
So the answer is yes. You can do that sort of thing, because the information is always there. The issue is to get access to it. And just sort of trust that what comes up. And as I say, it isn't always accurate, but sometimes it is. But associative remote viewing is the way to quantify it. And it's been quantified, the odds now with all the experiments that have been done, and not only by Stanford Research Institute, Princeton University got involved, and they've got all kinds of reports out on this. But the scientific community refuses to accept this.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was going to ask you. Like, how is it perceived by the scientific end of?
There are some scientists, like myself, but not that many, that have written research papers. There are some get published every now and then in peer-reviewed journals. They have their own journal, the Journal of Parapsychology, of course.
Yeah.
However, most scientists still would stop because there is no good theoretical model. The closest we come is using vague words like, hey, it's got to do with quantum mechanics and non-locality and Maybe gravity, shifts in time, but no one really understands it. And that's because it's more fundamental than our models. Our models are buried within what we're talking about, in my opinion. However, I think it's important for society to kind of get that precognition is real, that the way the universe is put together permits information from the future to be gathered in the now, and that the future is not like linear with the past, present, and future. Somehow it's all interconnected. And I see that as a major paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Because once that gets accepted, science is, I think, going to come screaming. Because science has actually done what science is supposed to do. There's all kinds of good scientific reports out there. Ed May has done incredible work, as James Spottiswoode. There are all kinds of people that have done the double-blind, triple-blind, all those kinds of studies. They've been published. But mainstream science will not accept this because, well, frankly, I think there are two reasons. One, there's no model. Two, they appreciate that this is so different than our current viewpoint that it is as dramatic a paradigm shift as, say, the Copernicus shift, when we used to think that the Earth was fixed at the center of the universe. And that kind of led to the first scientific revolution. And I think there's another scientific revolution coming once precognition and the remote viewing and out-of-body experiences, the real psychic phenomenon are kind of acknowledged and somehow brought into our society. And I do see that as kind of the grand challenge for those of us working in this field, is not only to do the applications that we do and explore it, but somehow get it out to society.
Are tests being done right now where they're actually monitoring brain patterns while remote viewing is being done?
Yes, that work has been done several times in several places. It's my understanding that they do not have like a specific signal that they can associate with when a remote viewer is, quote, on.
Yeah.
That would be called like a magic bullet, because then you'd be able to tell which information is 100% accurate. And we are not there, as far as I know.
Can a remote viewer manipulate, say, moving trees, or not just trees, moving leaves? I mean, not in the wind, but moving small things. Can a remote viewer have the ability to to move things?
You're talking about manipulating the environment?
Yeah, like for example, can we see the future, how the environment is going to be? And also, like, to see the weather shifting. Like, there's a lot of, right now we're going through a lot of earth changes, earth shifting. It's already started. I know our icebergs are really starting to collapse even more. Can we somehow, or is there a way that we can manipulate it and sort of bring back to what it should have from the beginning? Like, make sure the icebergs all don't melt, that we don't lose our wildlife?
Well, that's obviously an important question. That touches one of the other psychic phenomena that I know you guys must know about, and that's psychokinesis.
Yeah.
And I've come to believe there's certainly something there. It hasn't been investigated nearly as well what you're talking about, which is macro psychokinesis.
Yeah.
Micro psychokinesis, where you might it might look like you're influencing the outcome of a computer, making more zeros come up than ones. A lot of experiments have been done that way, and they call those psychokinesis because they think you're affecting the computer to give more zeros than one when you intend to do it. All this is connected with intention. I think micro psychokinesis is really a type of precognition, because everything has been set up so you would get more zeros when you intend to get it. So it's not clear you're causing it so much as tuning up and being there at the right time, both you and the tasker. But macro psychokinesis, that's something different.
Yeah.
And sort of a fun example of that is spoon bending.
Uri Geller.
But
Geller.
Uri Geller.
Uri Geller, and there's always a spoon bending party at remote viewing conferences, and we had one at our last conference in Las Vegas, and it really seems to work. Even Dean Radin, who wrote The Conscious Universe, he's very famous in the general field of parapsychology, has a page where he was a non-believer, but he did it. And he shows pictures of what he did, and he talks about the metallurgy of it. Anyway, it's real. But could you do anything as dramatic as what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Boy, wouldn't that be terrific? And maybe that's a motivation. Maybe that's the sort of thing, if our society would come to accept it, you could start taking things on that way, with enough funding and enough people to indeed do it. Wouldn't that be marvelous?
Well, I do spoon bending myself, and I've actually had a spoon that actually was 3 times as strong. You can't just easily. If you have to bend the spoon in half, so to speak, you got to use your whole hand to really try and bend it. And I was able to bend the spoon with only 2 fingers, and did it 3 times in a twist. And I really freaked out people. And I was even trying to teach people how to spoon bend. And a lot of the adults, and there was actually a few kids that had participated, and most of the kids were able to bend the spoons more than the adults were.
Isn't that based on...
because they don't have so much negative programming.
That's right.
Exactly, because the thought is, are you sure I can do it? Am I sure I can do it? And yet the kids, I can say to them, just visualize it being liquid and just bend them. Just like a liquid, just liquid. You're bending liquid. Right. Well, okay, they think the word liquid, and those spoons are just twisting like crazy, and everybody's standing there going, how did they do that?
Well, that's getting into kinetic energy transfer, right?
Yeah. So, again, remote viewing, even though we were able to actually see the future as far as the weather is concerned, Earth shifting, I remember years ago someone came up with having to remote view a new map of North America, what it was going to look like in a matter of 50 years from now.
But you see, you have to remember, all of this stuff is not 100% accurate. People who remote view the future, and Ed Dames has remote viewed some terrible futures which have not occurred, and others remote view the future. You're asking to remote view the future, it may be more accurate than the current global warming climate models. Those aren't accurate either. Those they have different climate models. They predict different things. The community, that community puts together a consensus. They're comparing it to data as it comes, and some matches and some doesn't. That's a scientific method. But please don't ever get in your head when you say you can remote view the way the globe is going to be 50 years from now. Yes, you can, but only with a uncertainty factor, which is uncertain. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's not, in my opinion, the best way to use remote viewing yet. If we get to the point where we've done enough of this experiments where we can say, because we've done the same kind of thing 100 times and it was accurate 80 times, okay, then the next experiment we believe is going to be 80% accurate. But we're not anywhere near that for the kinds of work you're talking about. In associative remote viewing, we're talking about over the long term, I would say 60 to 65% accurate on what would be 50-50 probability predictions. Now that's still very good. That's a 10 to 15% edge.
Yeah.
What would be the most, I would say, interesting surprise for you when you remote viewed a specific location or task at the time?
It's interesting that you say it that way, because Russ Targ says those are the gold. Whatever comes in as a surprise, that's gold. The one that flashed for me was many, many years ago. I was doing a ARV session, and I tasted the salt in the ocean. I had drawn some rectangular things and long things, and in retrospect it turned out to be, and the target was a lighthouse, but out of nowhere I tasted salt, and I had water down, and so it was like ocean salt. So stuff like that happens, and those moments are like golden. On at least my transcripts, I always circle those and draw attention to them, because the surprises are quite valuable. Because where do they come from? They come deep within the subconscious, not from the intellect. And that's what you're looking for.
What was the one would say, how long have you, when you go in to do a remote view, how long does it take you, how long have you actually been into remote view, so I would say time-wise? The longest you've ever been done?
Well, the longest, the guys in the Army, Fort Meade had a whole division there, headed by Skip Atwater. That's where Joe McMonagle was, and I don't know. Ed Dames, in fact, comes out of that same group. Anyway, a lot of names that are well known in the field. They would be asked to do sessions which would go on, say, maybe for an hour. They'd take a break, maybe do another hour. If the tasker thought they were onto something, they would ask them to do it the next day. So I suspect, they would end off with tens and tens, 30, 40 pages, and it would take many, many, many hours to complete a task. And then the tasker might take one part and add another task to it.
Yeah.
So that's at the long end. In associative remote viewing, most people do cool downs of maybe 5 to 15 minutes, some longer, until they get to feel they're really in that kind of special space when you're in touch with your deep subconscious that's in touch with everything. And then the actual remote viewing session might only take 5, 10, 15 minutes. I don't know how long Derrick takes, but then you do a feedback session, and that also takes maybe 5 to 15 minutes. Does that match with your experience?
Yeah,
Derrick?
well, I would say for me, probably about 5 to a half an hour, 5 minutes to 30 to a half an hour. And sometimes I feel like I'm right out of my body, so to speak. Like I'm just gone. Like you feel, you feel like you're one with the chair. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? You're sitting there and you're gone, and your body's not part of you. It's part of the item that you're sitting on. You don't feel like you're here, but you're out. You're gone, and you're looking. And when you come back, you go like, "Whoa, wow, where was I?" It's almost like you get that little bit of I get a snap in my head. It's like a little snap feeling when I'm seeing.
See, I think that's another important point, because notice Derrick is saying I. I think every remote viewer, every associative remote viewer, has a different personal experience.
Yeah.
The key is that it is a personal experience, and they know it's their personal experience, and virtually all of us enjoy that place. Otherwise, you wouldn't keep doing it. But it's a bit like meditation. Meditators seem to be the one high correlation between successful remote viewing and a guy who just comes in. If he's a meditator, he seems to take to it sooner, because the cool down gets you into a quiet space, and meditators know how to do that. also creative people. Where does creativity come from? It tends to come from the subconscious. But even people who wouldn't say they're either of those, when they get into this, they start touching that part of their inner self, and guess what? It's very enjoyable, and it's very creative, because this stuff is coming out of a deeper part of yourself.
When the again, another example or question is this: was it the military first that took, I guess you'd say,
the initiative to study it?
Started it first, or did someone actually, just a regular guy with a bunch of group of people, sat down and said they want a remote view, and then did the military catch on after, or were they first into it?
How about the oracles of Delphi?
Oh yeah,
there you go.
How about, this ability goes back as far as there are any recorded history. There are all kinds of prophecies in the Bible.
Yeah.
But this goes back pre-biblical ages. And the stories of the oracles of Delphi are just incredible. They were tested, and they were chosen among a lot of people who thought they could do prophecy because they were so right on with one of the local, whoever was in charge of things in those days. I don't know if it was a Caesar or... Anyway, this idea of doing precognitive remote viewing, in that case, goes back to all recorded history. Now, the military, our military, got involved, I believe, because they were concerned that the Russians were using it. Psychic Phenomenon Behind the Iron Curtain was a very famous book.
Yeah.
I read that book.
Right. And the Soviets were supposedly spying on us, and they probably were. And so, guess what? We needed to find out, hey, is there anything really to this? And that was the appropriate response. And, it makes sense that it came from there. Associative remote viewing, by the way, was actually started by a guy named Stephan Schwartz, who was working for the Navy. He was in the Chief of Naval Operations, and they actually tested it, believe it or not, in a submarine, because in the very early days, remember this is 1970s now, they didn't have communication when the subs would go deep underground, deep underwater. And so this was a possible way of sending out a signal, and they actually tested it, and I believe it was very successful. For example, there might be, he might have done 4 different responses that the naval operations wanted to send down to the sub, and they could synchronize times, and a remote viewer would send something, and there'd be a receiver in the sub, and depending on which of 4 possible pictures they got, they described the best, that would be the signal. That would be the idea.
Yeah.
And he actually invented associative remote viewing based on that idea. They never, of course, used it, but they did test it. And it was successful enough, that ARV has been going on ever since.
Was there ever? I'm not sure if you know anything about this, but have there? I'm going to go a little bit further. I like doing the detail stuff. Has there ever been, or if you know of, any of the military, say, like you brought up Russia and the United States, were there ever remote viewer wars? Like they're competing with each other to see if this is correct or that's not correct, or have they been trying to manipulate to make you think this is what they're doing, to make one fear the other, or to, I would say, outdo the other? Did you know anything about that?
You're talking about psychological warfare.
Psychological warfare, yeah. Psychological warfare in through remote viewing.
I don't know anything really very specific about that. I do know stuff like that. Well, the one example I know of is, and it's just sort of generic, but Lynn Buchanan talks about a story where they were interested in finding out information about a meeting that was going on, and he happened to notice that there was a Chinese remote viewer there as well.
So the Chinese remote viewer could have manipulated what they think that was there?
No, you keep using the word manipulation, and I don't understand. I don't understand that word. I do know. You know,
I guess to say create a thought form to make them think this is what they are doing or not doing.
Well,
that's a little different.
This idea
Does that
of putting
make any
thought
sense?
forms in other people's minds, I know that has been worked informally. I know that has been worked informally.
Yeah.
Whether there have been wars and how do you measure whether it's successful or not? You see, you're asking a scientist here. And I really think people who listen to this and who think about it have to think about it scientifically and not just accept it.
Yeah.
Because if you accept it too quickly, you're making a mistake. So, I mean, how do you know if something is being manipulated versus it would have happened on its own? All you really know is what happens, what you experience directly in real time. That's all you know.
They experience the outcome of the situation without any manipulation or whatever.
Yeah, but you know, now maybe it would have happened anyway. Maybe what you were doing is setting up something and you're saying, aha, I really want this to happen. But that was part of some bigger picture where it was destined to happen. And, you know, there's so many different points of view. Has there been a case where, you know, some organization has, you know, it's even hard to set up an experiment.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's where I'm coming from. I find it hard to set up an experiment because everything is so interconnected in this consciousness world of ours.
As far as funding for research for this, for the ARV, are colleges, universities coming forward and saying, I would like to research what's going on right now with the ARV?
There are some programs now just started at some colleges where they will be discussing this. There are not too many grants given, but I think like Paul Smith, I think his son actually at a university did an ARV experiment, and it got discussed at an ARVer conference. So there's a little bit of work, but it's just starting. I mean, we're just beginning. Well, I'd say we're continuing, but at a very slow pace to get into the other institutions and make more and more of an impact on society.
Have you met Paul Elder?
I've done workshops with Paul Elder at the Monroe Institute.
Wow.
So, yeah, so I know Paul Elder. We've done maybe 2 or 3 workshops together.
Cool. He lives out here in BC.
I know that.
Yeah.
And I know his book, and he's a terrific guy and a great remote viewer, and he's done some ARV with us. He just seems to get so busy that he can never do it kind of regularly.
Yeah,
I presume he's still giving a lot of webinar workshops and stuff like that.
He does a lot of workshops. He's always gotten people involved, but I'm not sure if he's ever able, or if he has been doing any remote viewing courses or classes in any colleges or universities here out in Canada.
I don't know either. I know he gives them, and quite a few, I guess, every year, because he's always busy. I've tried to get him more involved in some of our stuff, and he always starts, and then he just gets too busy.
Yeah.
If someone wanted to get involved with ARV, how would they go about doing that, other than contacting you guys?
Right. If they go to appliedprecog.com, appliedprecog, one word, .com, they can find out about our organization, and there are forms there where they can basically say, hey, I want to get involved with you guys, and they're involved. They'll get involved first with the discussion group. And then we want them to get involved in actual groups that are doing associative remote viewing right now.
Yeah.
So we have sports groups and we have financial groups.
Yeah,
So if anybody is interested, have them go to applyprecog.com.
Are there any videos on this that people can check out?
I'm sorry, I just didn't get that.
Sorry, are there any videos available to check this out?
Any big...
Any DVDs that you may
DVDs,
play?
videos.
DVDs.
Sorry, I'm British, I have a weird accent.
We have all kinds of stuff posted. If they get in that discussion group, they'll see emails. We do live webinars probably every other week on one subject or another. So we're really quite active. And we could do, we'll do webinars where we'll teach them how to do remote viewing at the level of associative remote viewing is different than like the military guys that used to do many, many pages.
Yeah.
We typically teach people how to do 1 or 2 page sessions because that's enough to distinguish between 2 photo sites.
Actually, Derrick was just asking me, are you wearing a blue-green shirt right now?
No.
There you go. Sorry.
Well, let me. I certainly have plenty of blue because I got jeans and I got blue on my shirt, but I don't have any green. Sorry.
Okay, I saw the shirt being blue, but then I saw your skin tone was a little bit off green.
Yeah, well, maybe not enough. Maybe too many vegetables. I don't know. Love my salad.
Too much broccoli.
Yeah, no, I mean I can actually see your aura, your auric field, and I'm sitting here and I could see the blue, and I thought, okay, then I'm looking around you and I see some of the green. That could be your auric field. That means that that's all to do with. I mean, I'm not sure if you understand the auric colors.
I don't.
Okay, the green represents the person who's actually very highly intuitive, highly intellectual. So you have that around you. It's an auric field. It's an energy that we release. Each of us has something that we're dealing with. We have, and the colors will change as we think of something differently.
Yeah, that's cool. I know one other person that sees auras. Yeah, I think that's cool. I have no problem with that. I mean, I have a physical energy field and I have a consciousness energy field, and the two are intimately connected, so it makes sense to me.
Oh, I have to remember now, I'm actually in the dark looking at you, so maybe my eyes are seeing you green.
Yeah,
there you go.
And you're seeing through my aura, so who knows?
Well, it's kind of interesting that you picked up that one of us is actually wearing headphones. Normally I don't wear headphones when I interview people. Mm-hmm. I take them off, and because there's only one of us wearing headphones, that was pretty damn accurate for...
Yeah, that was a nice hit.
Yeah, it was a good hit.
Good hit.
So what's coming up as far as developments within the field?
Well, my opinion is the next major step for us to impact society, which is my objective. So the work I do really is aimed at impacting society. And being very direct, it is going to be through money.
Yeah.
Science has done its job. It really has. Science has done virtually everything it can do. In fact, one of the scientists that reviewed the field basically said that. There have been enough experiments done that you're not going to convince anybody who is super skeptic. The focus ought to go away from experiments to just understanding it more and applications. So what I am all about, and what I think, and I hope more and more in our community will be about, are practical applications which can impact on society, and money would be one.
So you're saying that you can actually, or you're going to try to remote view the American World Bank?
No.
That's gone a little bit too far there.
But how would
To see if the money really is in there.
How would that help a person, though? What would help a person would be if they could predict if a particular, say, financial instrument that they could buy in the morning would go up or down by the evening.
So it's more like a stock market.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Now we're really playing with something heavy here.
And that's just like sports. It's a matter of binary choices, where, in fact, in Canada, you can legally wager on sports, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you could do it on sports. You could make money on sports legally there. But even a bigger area, in my opinion, are the financial markets.
See, if they left Pete Rose alone, things would have been fine.
You're right.
Boy, you're going back a ways.
It's funny how he's the only baseball player, any sports player, that actually was sentenced to go to jail and lose his career and remove his history as a ball player because he gambled on his team. And everybody else just walked away like, oh, it wasn't me, and I don't know, it was manipulated. But
Yeah.
Pete Rose, they made him look like the worst in the world. I think that was very crushing.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that happens all too often. You know, they always get one or two guys, and but you know, they're trying to send a message, I guess.
Now, was that remote viewed?
I'm not sure about that.
Or was it proven?
I think you lost them.
I don't know.
I'm just playing with you, Marty. I'm sorry.
Yeah, right. You obviously got on a subject of great interest to you. It doesn't have a lot to do with remote viewing, I'm afraid.
Got to have a lot of humor in what you're doing, because I know sometimes it can be quite stressing. I know I've heard a lot of stories of guys that got burned out so bad they had to stop for a while.
No, that is definitely true. And one of the nice parts about ARV is it's not life or death. And it's something which only makes sense if you do it regularly, because it's a probabilistic thing and you know you're going to have some misses. You know, if you're doing 60-65%, you're going to have 35 to 40% of your sessions are going to be misses. You also have passes. And you need to learn how to enjoy that too.
Yeah.
Because you have to enjoy the process. So you're absolutely right. And the people who hang around are the ones who can do that and don't get... All of us go through those frustrated moments. I'm sure even Derrick does.
Yeah.
But
there.
You just handle it as part of the journey. That old expression, enjoy the journey, is really true.
Yeah. Have you ever had burnout yourself?
Yes, I've had to call breaks just because I got to be doing too many. I was doing too much remote viewing myself and doing too much managing.
Yeah.
And I just had to call a break. I could feel that it was my own, sort of my own energy was.
And did it ever affect your
turning negative?
Well, did it ever affect your relationship in family? You know what I mean? Like it's where it crosses over into family life and not just business, or not just your project.
Yes, because you start spending too much time on it. And I have to tell you, because of that, and also sort of an intuitive emotional feeling, I believe the best remote viewers over the long term are going to be those who can integrate in a really smooth, enjoyable fashion their remote viewing work, whether it's regular, looking for, missing people, or ARVing, can integrate all of that into their full life, with their family, with their friends.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting you bring that up.
Another life.
It's really interesting you bring that up, because I was doing a lot of investigations, and my wife was getting a little bit ticked off that I was spending so much time away on the weekends. So I got her involved in it, and now she's co-founder of the Canadian Paranormal Society. It needed to be an integration between the two of us, where we both had an interest in it, rather than me just taking off every weekend and leaving her at home.
I had the most trouble with my wife when she was the ultra skeptic. And it was sort of interesting to watch her transformation, because I would show her these matches and have her help me judge, and she was willing to do that,
Yeah.
still being a skeptic. And then she would see these matches and then see the hit, and she's now a believer. And we actually run a group in my home once a week here of friends. So she's turned around too.
So now she's leading it, right?
Well, no, she's not as active as I am, but she's tolerant and more than willing to openly talk about it.
Yeah.
That's another thing which has happened over the last.
Do you find more women are wanting to get more involved in it, or men?
Or is it a combination?
Or is it a combination?
I don't
Even.
really. We ought to do a gender count of our people in our organization, because I think there are a lot of both. I don't know the answer to that. I ought to do a gender count so I can answer that next time, at least within our organization. But, you sort of think women have more of an intuitive side. That was sort of the old expression. But there are an awful lot of men involved.
Have you ever done any Canadian remote viewing, like basically remote viewing what's going on in Canada?
No. Again, remember, we're really focused on associative remote viewing now.
See what happens? Because
Yeah.
he sees too much snow. That's why he couldn't see. He had whiteout.
And I'm sure some of our targets are Canadian. We got some great targets of bears, catching tuna on the fly and stuff like that. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of them are in Canada.
Oh, yeah, we do have
Likely.
a lot of brown bears, grizzlies picking up salmon.
Exactly.
That's true. Yeah.
There's one thing I was going to ask you. Does this tie in with ESP? I remember way back in the day you used to have those cards with the squiggly lines on them and the blue triangles, yellow square.
Yes. This is extrasensory perception. We occasionally use that word. This is a type of that. The old stuff that was done by Rhine with the cards is an example of what's called forced choice experiments.
Oh, okay.
And those do not work as well, and this has been shown scientifically, experimentally, as well as what is called free choice or the open predictions, like what we do in remote viewing in ARV, where, it's like, tell me if it's heads or tails, or tell me if it's one of these five. After a while, you say, gee, I had 3 heads in a row, the next one must be a tail.
Yeah.
But of course, that's not true. Probabilistically, it's still 50-50. And it's just shown that the open tasking is in fact better, where there's virtually no front loading. You just don't know really anything about the target to speak of, except maybe it's going to be a place in the universe. As I said, they remote view Jupiter. They've probably done other things too.
For all of our new listeners out there that not know too much about remote viewing, and maybe we'd like to get you to share with us somehow a little bit of an excerpt how it works, so then it gives them an idea that what it can benefit them if they prefer to use it or want to use it for their personal life or profession.
Well, you need to set up the tasking. So it all starts with the tasking. Usually, it's best for the tasking to be blind. One of the best remote viewers, Joe McMonagle, has put a bunch of questions that he's interested in sealed envelopes. And when he's not working professionally, and he is he's one of those guys that's earning a full living at this, he will go and randomly choose the tasking from one of these envelopes, so he doesn't know what it is. And he'll just probably put a random number on the envelope. And then it will be, okay. So then he'll get very, very quiet and set the strong intention to describe and sketch and answer what the question was or the issue inside the envelope. So people can do that themselves. And then they might get very, very quiet and focus on their breath. This is what would be called cool down. and get rid of the day-to-day stuff, get rid of as much of the intellectual stuff as you can, and get in touch with, again, different people use different words, the deeper self, the inner self, the subconscious, the collective unconscious, the higher self, something inside you, something deeper, something bigger than you that is connected with everything, including the specific information you want. And you set the intention for that information, you get quiet, and at some point in time it'll feel right, and then you open your eyes, and whatever comes to you, you put down on a sheet of paper. And usually it comes fast. And the idea is to get it down, whatever comes, and then you might get quiet again, set the intention again, and put it down on a piece of paper. And you'll get information about whatever was in that envelope.
Yeah, that's kind of a good point.
But remember, it's not 100% accurate.
No.
And yet you hear these wonderful stories about someone who was asking about the person he would meet and be very happily married to. Something came to that person, met that person, married them, and they're still happily married. So they're wonderful success stories too, but sometimes they're not.
So most people actually are writing as well as doodling on the picture, or do they just write what they have to say, not doing any? Or I'm sure they must be drawing pictures, or sort of like.
Right, it's whatever comes to them.
Okay.
A lot of people are visual. Usually there's a combination of visual things, and they won't be crisp. Usually they'll be just partial at first, and then words will come up, and as long as they seem to come up from inside, you should put them down. If you think like it's an intellectual thing, you spilled hot coffee on you that day and hot coffee comes to mind, you might write it down, but they write that down on the right side of the sheet and they call it AOL.
Yeah.
There are simple techniques that people do, but you can develop it yourself. You do want to understand the difference between it coming from your intellect versus coming from the subconscious. And all of this happens when you do it over and over and over again. There's a lot of beginner's luck, but not always. But the best way to get involved in this is to sort of commit yourself to do it regularly for a reasonably long period of time, probably months. Because then you'll really settle into it. Plus you're telling your subconscious that this is important and this is something which you believe in. And you want to really stay positive. And then you want to learn from your feedback. I mean, I really recommend in those envelopes should be things that you will get feedback.
Yeah.
So you'll know how well you're doing. Otherwise, how do you calibrate yourself?
So the average is around 6 months to a year to get most of your training that way? Or is it longer?
No.
I think it depends on the individual.
That long, even sometimes less. If you give yourself short-term things that you can experiment with, I don't know, what just came to mind is you're going to be visiting somebody and you do a session before and you try to get an image of what they're going to be wearing. Might be an example, and then when you see them, you can see whether it matched or not. So you can do those kind of experiments. And you can even experiment on your own with ARV.
Okay, so if I focus on a specific thought, I'm not sure if that word is proper, I have something that I want to do or I'm going to do. Can you remote view what I have if I wrote it down on a piece of paper here, and if I focus on that thought to you, can you pick that up as a remote viewer?
Yeah, I could, sure. I mean, whether I could do it accurately or not, but that is something I could get quiet, and if you wrote down the thought and started really thinking about it, that would be something I could pick up. We have some wonderful examples on our website, and it's been published in a magazine called 8 Martinis, if you Google 8 Martinis, you'll get that magazine, and I published it in there, about a telepathic precognitive incident where two people actually had a telepathy, but it was precognitive. The person wrote something down that was going to happen to another person, but neither of them knew they were going to do it, but it was so specific. It was very clearly a precognitive mental telepathy incident. So I have no doubt that you can get things out of other people's minds. And that bothers people a lot, and I don't like to do that very much. That's why, frankly, associative remote viewing, where you are basically reading your own mind. See, there's no ethical issues at all.
Yeah.
Right? You're reading your own future mind. You're reading the feedback photo site that you're going to see, say, tomorrow. That's different. And people can do that. People can say, okay, describe and sketch when I go to Google Images, and if you put in a number, images will come up. Describe and sketch the first image that I get from Google Images. And people practice like that sometimes.
So what I have done, Marty, was I wrote down.
Okay.
I really want to have some fun, see if it works.
Okay.
Okay.
He's picking on you.
I'm sorry, but I want to see because reason why I'm doing this because it gives me more encouragement that I really want to go more into this.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So whether you're right or wrong, I don't mind. I just want to find out and see what I wrote down. I wrote down 4 words. Okay, 4 large letter words.
It's a sentence.
And it's a sentence, and I boxed it. And it's in front of me, and my thoughts are the 4 words. And so how you do it, you want to focus on me, those thoughts. This is what I have.
Okay, this is what I call a onesie, but which I don't usually like to do, and I will do it for you.
Yeah, I'll appreciate
So
it.
let me get quiet, and why don't both of you not only focus on the words, but focus on what the images that might be associated with the words, okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Words have meaning. So you guys get into that right now, and I will get quiet, and I'll tell you what I get.
Sounds great.
Excellent. And of course, for the audience out there.
It's for the audience. Yeah, the audience will find out in a matter of a few minutes.
So we focus on the word and what's associated with it. Marty's getting quiet. Let's see if we can come up with something interesting.
Okay, I see a tree, rectangle, and water. So those are the 3 things I got for whatever reason.
Tree, rectangle.
Okay, tree, rectangle, and water.
I can see by your silence that that's probably not a good match, but that's what I got.
Yeah.
Okay. You're correct on the word rectangle because I boxed it around the words.
Oh, that's interesting. That may be why I got rectangle, but you had told me that, so
Yeah,
That's fine. And the word, the tree and the water. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's got to be it.
Yeah, that's got to be it.
Okay. The water is here
Yeah.
because we're BC,
Yeah.
right? What I'm planning on doing, and whether you want to confirm that or not, but I have plans on doing my own TV show.
Oh, okay.
And what I had done is I boxed it around the words, my TV show. And the way we looked at it, when you said tree, I'm not sure if the word tree or TV is so familiar.
Ah, interesting.
Okay. And water is British Columbia because we have water all wrapped around us.
And if we want to stretch things, and that's always one of the issues here, And that's why I like ARV. Are we stretching the remote viewing?
Yeah.
But the rectangle could easily be an image I got of TV,
Yeah.
Yeah.
not the
Not
rectangle
necessarily the
that
box
you told
around
me
the
about.
woods.
Yeah. Because the TV itself is a rectangle.
That's right. But, you know, whether, would you call this a hit? Would you call this not a hit? I don't know. I'm not real happy with
You know what?
it. But
I don't mind if it's a judgment or not. For what I'm concerned, what I just wanted to find out is see how we can see the details. How and I know I understand the time we have to take to look at more carefully. Like, yes, you only had a couple of minutes in the difference compared to 5 or 10, right?
right.
So I understand that part because I know what it's like when you have to sit and you visualize what the words are or even the image of what's placed before you. And then, again, the thought form and then create the visual. Well, my vision actually is running my own TV show, but it'll be like an Ellen show, but in the psychic sense.
Yeah, well, that's terrific.
Right? It's never been done.
I hope it plays in the United States.
I hope so too. Right now we're running it in Canada. So yeah, it's something that we've already made a proposal with the station. They're all for it. It's just now we got to come up with the money.
Well, good luck with that. Because,
That's the part.
again, you're a part of education, and that's what I believe is the next step, is not educating the scientific community. They sort of had their chance, but educating society.
Yeah.
And TV programs and stuff like that is just the way to go about it.
Yeah, this one is all to do with interviewing people like yourself on television. And then the last fifth, like we want to run it to a 1 hour show. So basically, it'll be all to do with interviews. And then the last 15 minutes of the program, we do mediumship messages to the public,
Okay.
to the studio audience. So it's a variety of everything and anything you think of. It's never been done before. There's always been interviews, but never that way.
Yeah.
So we've actually brought the development idea to the station. They think it's great. So they just said, well, now we got to come up with some money to have it working. So they're willing to make it happen. Just
That sounds a little bit like what Jeff Richards from the APDN's The Other Side is doing right now on
Yep.
radio.
Yeah.
So
That would be
give an idea.
really exciting. And I just had an interesting idea for you.
Okay.
Well, I've had the idea before, but I haven't shared it with too many people. On TV or radio, with the ability of an audience to tweet in or one way or another communicate with you, you could actually have them do a precognitive reading and basically take a vote over your audience on whether or not Team A or Team B is going to win. But being blind, probably better would be to do over a certain number of points or under a certain number of points. You know, something like that, which is a 50-50 proposition.
Yeah.
And you could give them guidance, just like I had done, get them to sit down, get quiet, and do whatever images come to their mind.
Well, that's where Marty comes in.
Yeah, well, maybe I could design something like that.
Yep.
Well, there
The
you go.
problem is, how would you have
See, I
them
already have a
choose?
title. We already have a registered title with the show. It's called Between Two Worlds Television.
Okay, that's cool.
So it's making connection between two worlds, and it's all to do with the visuals. So basically, it's all to do with two visions in our lives. And
The two worlds. What words you use for the two worlds? The physical world and
the spiritual world.
spirit. Oh, I love it.
Okay.
That's just a word I would use.
Yeah, the physical
Because
world.
it's
and
the
spiritual world.
spirit that is doing this communication.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly. I've been doing radio for 20 years. I went from terrestrial radio to internet radio. So I've been doing radio for 20 years.
Actually, Derrick was the one that got me into radio.
Yeah, I talked him into it.
Talked me into it, and now what am I doing here?
I told Glen, I said, "You're gonna be one hell of a good show host, man. You gotta have your own show."
Well, it's good that you're here today, because generally I'm pretty quiet, and that's why I have my wife on as co-host.
Yeah.
But when Derrick's here, I'll just sit back and listen for a couple of hours.
Oh, yeah,
Good to go. I'm putting my 10
Glen
cents
is the
every now and
major researcher. He's actually the science of this one, and then mine's the, I guess you should say, mine's the physical.
Okay.
So we put our heads together, both him and I. We've been good friends for a long time, and
Well, look,
so
you've
we
got
sit down and work things
all
out.
of my support. This is wonderful, and I've got a lot of contacts in the field from the U.S., which I'd be happy, if it makes sense to you and you want to, just to provide to you. So
Sure, I would actually love to have you on our show too
yeah, I'll be happy to do that.
when you get it running. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that. In fact, I don't know how we could do this, but it may even be you might want to think about doing a workshop, and maybe you video it as one of your shows or part of it.
No, that's one heck of an idea. Because basically, what we're doing is that we are doing a 4-hour show, and we break it up into 1-hour increments. And that is basically, you're supposed to have 13 weeks. So basically, you're doing 3 individual shows, 3 days, and then the 13th show will be is a combination of saying, this is what we did, we did what's throughout the whole season, and the public's response. And I've watched so many shows for so many years. OWN used to do a lot of spiritual shows, healing shows, and they've never come close to the ideas that I got. And I kept on saying, they need to do this, need to do this, need to do this. A very good friend of mine who just passed away this year, Kenny Kingston, who I've known since I was 14 years old. I'm 58 now, so I've known him over 44 years. Like I said, mentioned about him earlier. Kenny was one of my main influences to say, Derrick, don't let your dream die. Make it happen, because if you let it go, you'll regret it.
Yeah.
Right.
And this man passed away at the age of 86. He used to read for famous people like Marilyn Monroe, famous presidents, Harry Truman, John Wayne, Lucille Ball, all these famous people he used to read for. And he became very well known. I'm sure you may know who he is. And when I got to get to know him even more just before he became ill. I had him on my show back in 2007 or 8, and I told him my story. I finally broke down and told him my story, how much I've known about him. The most interesting part of the story was I knew to the exact day and date when I saw him for the first time on TV in 1971 in Edmonton on the show called Tommy Banks. I knew that November the 10th, the day I remember that so well. Here I'm 14, never paid attention to that, but I knew the dates so well. I saw him on Kenny Kingston or on Tommy Banks the very first time, and Tommy Banks, what you call like a Jay Leno, right? And talk show. So when I watched the show, and I looked at my mom and I said, it'd be kind of cool to be like him. And I just watched it, and when I saw that, and he used to be on Merv Griffin quite often, and Merv Griffin used to call him his psychotic. It was never a psychic, but back in the 70s.
We joke about that in our community.
Yeah, so it became. He was such a good man, and he always called you sweet spirit. It was never, he's always your good friend or a sweet spirit. He always was very kind with people. He never had a negative thing to talk about. And so when he told me, he said, Derrick, you got something going here, and you should never avoid it. Don't walk away from it. It's going to do you well.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I just hope in the show that you try to bring as much science as you can, and what could be verified, and let people know that, yes, this doesn't work all the time. In other words, be realistic about it. That would be something that would be brand new.
That's the important part. I've actually had, I remember watching some of the shows that actually had skeptics and say, oh, no, it didn't work, it's just fake, fraud. And that's not what I want. I don't want that amazing Randy crap.
Right.
I mean, I respect his work, but Randy didn't have to disrespect all of us and say, all you psychics are frauds. He should know.
That's a closed-minded skeptic.
That's closed-minded skeptic. His vision was just to make money off of you anyways. I don't care if he was best friends of all the rockers when he used to do all their light shows and smoke shows when they were on the tour back in the 60s and 70s or 80s. And what's important to me is that Yes, science is very, very important. And one thing I learned from a good friend of ours, Barb Leonard, she used to always say that make sure science is included in the psychic field because it can be proven.
Well, it's just like me and you working together. Like
Exactly.
You're on the metaphysical side, I'm on the scientific side. I need to have documented proof, but I still use mediums, psychics, and sensitives on investigations as an extra tool.
And what's my title I'm going to be using for the conference?
There you go.
My title will be, are mediums useful in the paranormal investigations, or is technology taking over and take the mediums out of it?
Wow, okay. And that fits with what I want to say in terms of I see the next paradigm shift being the balance between the physical, intellectual, which is closer to the physical, and the spiritual.
Yeah.
It's getting that harmony, as opposed to now we see them as being very separate. And so science it's not like science is going to go away. Science will be well integrated with the spiritual, and that'll be a new world.
We do have a bit of a discrepancy here with our Prime Minister in Canada because he's eliminated all the scientists in Canada to be accepted as part, no matter if it relates to environment or any other programming. He's actually removing them out of the government completely. And,
why is that?
Because he's into this NWO thing.
What's that?
New World Order. He figures that he can make his own parliamentary government. His conservative government can actually make their own decisions without using scientists to tell them what they should or should not do.
That's a little scary.
Bullshit.
I hadn't heard that before.
He is. He already did. Because we have a good friend here. A lot of people know him very well across the world. His name is Dr. David Suzuki. And the only thing that Suzuki can do now is do a TV show called The Nature of Things, telling the stories and narration. But our Prime Minister Harper, he has a tendency of actually putting politics in front of it and saying, "Oh, scientists are not any good. They're just a waste of time. They're just blowhards. They don't really know what they're talking about." And he's really trying to make it where he's trying to eliminate the science out of things. And this is I love those challenges because I want people like you who have the science and say, "Okay, come here, Harper. You sit your butt down here. Let me tell you what I see in your government."
I can't see myself doing that. But I can see myself talking about how science and spirit are, in fact, intimately connected and should be intimately connected.
If you look at Dr. John Bindenagel on Ireland, he's a wildlife biologist. He's been top of his field.
Yeah.
He researched the Sasquatch. So his papers he writes tend not to be viewed too well from the scientific community. But he's got like 3 or 4 books out there, and the guy is a wildlife biologist.
But the crazy part, I'll give you a real quick story. A good friend of mine went out camping with friends of his out in the BC forest, out here in BC. We have our cedar trees are between 150 to 250 feet high. Mm-hmm. And he went camping with 5 friends of his, and they're actually camped near a lake, and they drove out there in a Jeep. So they're there for the weekend, and that very same afternoon, they're all inside the tent having a bite to eat, and they heard footsteps getting closer, and they thought, well, they saw this shadow passing by them. It looked very, very tall, taller than the average human. So they didn't bother opening the zipper. They kept it closed, but there's a little tiny peering hole in the side of the tent that wasn't so perfect that it was always sealed. Anyways, he actually looked out that little tiny hole, and you see this long, long hair, but it stunk like a really bad skunk, worse than skunk. And then all of a sudden, 4 other tall things, long hairy things, walked behind this one too as well. There's like 4 tall ones, 1 short one, half the size of, say, a human. And they knew then it wasn't bears, because bears, you can tell, they don't walk upright. So this guy is very truthful about things. Anyways, they're in this tent, there's 6 of them, and next thing you know, they hear things moving around, clinking of pots, things outside. And then, about maybe half an hour, because they're really quiet in the tent, they're not making any movement, they can hear this crunch, crunch, scrape, scrape, bang, real loud, as if you actually crashed into a car. A couple hours later, they decided to come out. They didn't hear any more no movement anymore. And as they walked out their tent, they figured, okay, we're going to get the hell out of here. They took their tent and started packing up and leaving. They were going to rush back to get out. When they got to the Jeep, the Jeep wasn't in the same spot where it was supposed to be. It actually was 6 feet high on top in the center of a huge boulder. It was centered. They picked it up and they put it on top of the boulder.
The problem I have with Sasquatch is that, taken from a purely scientific angle, is why has no one actually found any skeletal remains?
Well, or was it ETs? Because you mentioned
there you go.
earlier that's one of the things you're into. And my problem with that sort of thing, and the same thing with ghosts, it's not like the experiences happen too often.
Yeah.
Just like with UFOs, that there's something going on. It always gets at the level of the hypothesized explanations where it gets tough. I can't make that next step. So I have heard enough. When I was a kid, I was really into the Blue Book. Okay, when it first came out.
Project Blue Book.
It was called the Blue Book. The Air Force put out what they called the Blue Book, which was a description of a lot of the early sightings and all of that of the UFOs.
Yeah.
They discounted most of them, but they just kept coming. I'm convinced there's something there. I don't know what it is. I don't know for sure, though. More and more, I hear stories about physical beings on this planet. But again, I ask the question: could consciousness, a civilization, and we know we're not the oldest civilization around. So imagine a civilization that is 1,000,000 years ahead of us. I mean, even 1,000 years at the rate things are moving, would have capabilities with consciousness that we can barely imagine now. And so they might be able to project their consciousness and have it seem as if it was physically real. Or they might really be here physically. I mean, I just don't know.
I do.
When you look at it, I started investigating 27 years ago, and I was a complete skeptic, closed-mind skeptic when I got into it. But I wanted to find out what these idiots was true. Like, they had some thoughts on what maybe there is a possibility. My mother was a medium, my grandmother was a medium, and I wanted to find out if what they believed in was an actual possibility. And after 27 years of doing this, I've seen so much that I can't explain. Can I say it's a spirit, life after death, energy level, whatever? But I've seen so much stuff now that I can't take that opinion that it doesn't exist.
That it does exist.
That it does exist, in my opinion.
Yeah, but the question is, try to get more specific. Does it exist? I mean, I know there's other conscious beings out there someplace.
Yeah.
I don't know how far advanced they are. The odds of us being the most advanced is infinitesimal. So they're more advanced than us.
Yeah.
But now, are they here physically? Could they, in fact, land on the White House lawn and they choose not to?
They did.
They did. Okay, so that tells me a lot about where
back
you're
back in 1950, 56, 57, they did land on the White House lawn in the backyard of it, so to speak, and they had a chat with the president. They made a negotiation. They signed a contract to allow 1 million civilians of the United States to be abducted.
Now, how do you
in
know
return,
that?
they would actually teach them technology. Actually, that story came back from a fellow who actually works for the government. That's what he was stating. He worked for them to actually. He witnessed the on location in for example, Area 51. I mean, you can really get technical of it, but he's actually was one of the scientists that was actually on location and had seen all the ships.
And did he see who exited the ships, the nature, and all kinds of pictures of ETs? Which ones were they?
Well, it wasn't just pictures. He actually met one of the extraterrestrials that actually stood about 4 feet tall. And it was
a gray. It was a gray kind of.
He said it. No, why not gray? It was more of a brown, and it had.
Well, they call them grays. The short ones.
Yeah. Myself, I'm an abductee.
You are an abductee?
I am an abductee. I've been taken since I was 8 years old. And
oh my!
The last time I've been taken when I would say 14 years ago. I've got 2 implants in my body, one behind my thigh, one behind my nasal passage.
And that's been observed. Why? can you send pictures of the transplants and that sort of thing? X-rays?
When the doctor X-rayed me, they said they couldn't figure what that thing was behind my nasal passages nor behind my thigh. But every time they tried to get close to it, I was asking them they can take it out if they want, and they couldn't reach it. They kept on moving all the time.
That's a whole new different show.
Yeah.
Speaking of shows, guys, that's the first time I've done a 2-hour show ever.
Okay,
without...
I have great interest in this too, but again, as a scientist, I would ask, why wasn't that photo, they have real-time MRIs that they can do, fMRIs and X-rays in real time, and what you just described ought to be captured on film. In fact, that would be a great show for you.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to.
Because, here you are. So you would be able to then move one step closer to the way the scientific approach is.
Well, let's put it this way. Wouldn't it make amazing if you had a 9-foot-tall guy who's extraterrestrial come walking into your show and sit down and have a conversation with you? Hi, I'm from another planet.
Well, you laugh, but the big
No,
question,
I'm not laughing. I'm actually, this laughter is actually, I would love to.
Yeah, so would I.
That's just nervous laughter.
I would love one, if a spaceship were to land on our street, a lot of people might run away from it. I would go towards it.
Yep.
One of the key questions has always been, why, in fact, are they not making themselves more visible? They clearly could, and they're choosing not to, and they're choosing to do abductions instead, and you're saying that's because there's an agreement to do that, which is convenient explanation. But, what you just said about your implants, that's a show.
That's a whole new show altogether.
It's a whole new show in itself, yeah.
Anyway, guys, I'm running out of time here. I'd just like to thank you, Marty, for coming on the show. It's been an interesting 2 hours, and probably the first time I've ever had a show where I haven't done a commercial break in the middle.
You can edit it in.
I will. I'm sure I will not. Thanks, Marty, for coming on the show.
Really great talking to you guys.
It was fantastic.
And,
if people wanted to find more about ARV, where would they go?
Again, the best place to go, and there's an obvious form there, is to go to appliedprecog.com, and that'll start everything off, and I'm very available. They'll send stuff to me. In fact, if they want to, I'll even give you my email.
That works.
Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, at P as in Paul, -I, the letter I, -A.com. That actually stands for physics-intuition-applications.com. So I have a website that goes back with lots and lots of written material in it about remote viewing and precognition, and that's at p-i-a.com.
Thank you, Marty.
So there's a lot of information there, including some free ARV programs.
Perfect. I'd like to thank you both for coming on the show tonight. Derrick Whiteskycloud and Marty Rosenblatt. And up next on ztalkradio.com, Jim, Dr. Dim Fitzsimmons, and Dimland Radio. Until next week, have a good night.